Hello. Ooh, I can hear me now. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Professor Arabella Pluvier, and I am the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Creative Industries. And I'm a photographer, not a sound person. So if I look awkward, you'll know why. It's my great pleasure to extend a warm welcome to all of you for this, the annual celebration of the radio feature, Past, Present and Future. It is really special to welcome you here as radio professionals, academics, students, and enthusiasts. And from my first couple of conversations with people who are new to Sunderland. So you're very welcome, and yes, it's by the sea. To celebrate the rich history and exciting present and future of this medium. Here at the University of Sunderland, the Faculty of Arts and Creative Industries covers subjects across art, design, media and communications. And our students and researchers, often practice-based, operate across a range of practices and technologies, analogue and digital. But at the heart of the faculty is the very human need for storytelling. Whether truth or fiction, personal or the stories of others, storytelling can enable us to better understand ourselves, the world we live in, and challenge and rethink our histories and even envisage a future. At the university, our radio station, Spark, has been a key platform for our students, staff, and the broader community to explore and test out our different approaches and ideas, whilst ensuring that we are always on air. It has been at the heart of our media centre for many years and continues to grow in strength and reputation. So it is really wonderful to be able to welcome you here today for this conference. And I'm not going to take up any more time. That's your welcome. But I just wanted to say thank you all for coming. Sit back and enjoy, and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Arabella. Thank you very much. So welcome to this annual celebration of the radio audio feature, Past, Present and Future. And it's brilliant to be back in Sunderland. Some of you may remember the last time Charles Parker Day was here in the city in 2010, when it was held at the National Glass Centre just along the river. Once again this year, we are live streaming the event on our YouTube channel. So I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to everyone who's joining the conference via the live stream today. I do have to let those of you in the room know, firstly, I've been told it's extremely important that everybody knows where the toilets are. So you may have seen them already. The toilets are just outside that door along the corridor. And in the extremely unlikely event that we do have to evacuate the hall for any reason today, there are 2 exits at the bottom, 2 exits up the steps and at the back, and the assembly point is just outside on the piazza. So, Charles Parker, as many of you will know, was a pioneer of radio broadcasting and oral history, a very inspiring person, a lecturer, a folk musician, and a political campaigner. And one of his most significant contributions was to recognise the enormous value of the kind of language that we ordinary folk take for granted in our everyday conversations. And of course, he's best known for the radio ballads, the groundbreaking programmes, the radio ballads, made in the late 50s and early 60s with Ewan McCall and Peggy Seeger, which are still, in my opinion, the gold standard of radio production today. I grew up in a folk music family, and in my mid-20s, I decided to make the transition from being a skint folk singer to getting a proper job. So I managed to get a job producing the folk show on Radio 2, working for an independent production company. So that was my first job in radio. And I also got the chance then to work on the more contemporary series of radio ballads, and I got the opportunity to produce a few of those as well. So it's true to say that Charles Parker and his work have been a huge influence on my life and my work. So it really is a privilege to be here today and to be part of today. So today we're joined by students, by lovers of the radio ballads, by all the nominees in this year's Charles Parker Prize. You're all here today as well. And we're also joined by some former winners and some of the judges, and many of whom you'll get to meet as we go along the afternoon. So a very warm welcome to everyone. We're streaming all of the sessions until 3:30, when we will have a half-hour tea break. And then after that at 4, The students here are invited to a masterclass on sound design downstairs in room 007. And everyone else can come back in here and hear more about Charles Parker's work as a teacher and his influence on folk music and spoken word. So let's get into our first session of the day. The Charles Parker Prize has been running since 2004, and the winners, Hannah Walker-Brown, Katie Birmingham, Hannah Dean, Maya Bosworth, to name just a few of the winners, have all gone on to do great things in the audio industry. So to tell us about this year's entries, and to introduce the 11 nominees, who are all here, is a former creative director of BBC Audio and chair of the Charles Parker Prize judging panel. Please welcome Simon Elms.
Testing. Oh, good. Right. So welcome everybody to this exciting moment when everybody, you've all been waiting for this one, but this is the chance now to reflect on Charles Parker 2023. It was a big year in many ways, because it was our first year post-COVID, and that was very exciting in terms of the way the programs were made. We enjoyed that. I first of all like to say I've got a very long short list. There are 11 programs on this short list, so I'm going to rattle through it a bit. So please excuse me if I sort of eat my words a bit or fall over or whatever. First of all, I'd like to thank, of course, my fellow judges, Rezi Barnard in alphabetical order. Rezi Barnard, Felicity Finch, Gillian Reynolds, Philip Sellers, Anisha Sharma, and on the final lap from the BBC, commissioning editor for Radio 4, Hugh Levinson, who's here today. So, one thing I would say is that a loss and change amongst the radio courses around the country has meant that numbers were a little bit lower this year, but I'm happy to say the standards shown by the programmes that were entered show no signs of flagging at all. So, as in the past few years, I've grouped the shortlisted programmes into 4 short sequences, which have, by the way, no significance at all. If you want to start reading runes, you're wrong. There is no significance in the way they've been grouped, other than they make some sort of contrast or bring together different aspects of a similar subject. So, we'll kick off with 3 programmes that have a shared interest in our wildlife, both human and animal. First of all, I'm going to mention Out to Sea, Out of Mind by Lottie Steele from here at the University of Sunderland. It reflected, yeah, we can applaud after the clips. We can applaud, and then I'm going to get you all to stand up. So in this first group, there are 3. So prepare yourself to receive the applause of this company and to stand up. But that's afterwards. Out to Sea, Out of Mind by Lottie is reflected the undersea sound world of whales, fish, and crustaceans, and the threats that human sounds cause to their environment. It was, in the words of the judges, skillfully creative and expertly montaged so that there's a great sense of flow. They admired the beautiful use of sound and music, a shocking and important programme. Then there's Petra Robin Jones's Disappearing Birds for the University of the West of England. It focused on the fate of house martins, celebrated their beauty, and examined their declining numbers through a group of very persuasive speakers. Judges said it was well executed with good use of sound. These stories are engrossing and touching, moving, insightful, surprising, and sometimes shocking. Finally, in this group, and first up in terms of what you're going to hear, turning from the natural to the human world, Amongst the Sheep by Kieran Davis of the University of Salford dealt not with ewes and lambs, but with those diagnosed with autism. Kieran takes himself as his subject matter and entertainingly explores the condition in a programme the judges called friendly and playful with some charm. They enjoyed the entertaining narration and the interviewees, a production with considerable flair.
There's an old Disney short called Lambert the Sheepish Lion. It was made in 1952, so I'm going to assume you haven't seen it. It's about a lion brought up by a herd of sheep. Lambert thinks he's a sheep too and tries so hard to fit in with the others, but he can't understand why the other sheep leave him out and make fun of him all the time. The sheep know that Lambert is different, but as they don't recognise the lion, they can't explain why. Lambert is just not one of them. Now, I don't think that 1950s Disney was intent on making a short film about autism, but it is a surprisingly apt representation of my life growing up.
I like the smell of them. When you hold them in your hand, they've got a real powdery, sort of sweet talcum powder type smell. And they feel like little fake things. They don't feel like real little creatures. Like little shuttlecocks, actually. I now live in the West Country, on the very edge of a cliff, really, surrounded by nature. Last year was the first year that I think I became so aware of the numbers of house martins dropping. I thought I would write a short story.
Listen, she said. Hear that? A van roared past, moving way too fast, then was gone. A flurry of startled sparrows emerged from the ivy that matted the walls. What? What am I listening to? Evie sighed. Open your ears. And then Sam heard it. Silence. Where are the house martins? They've not come back, have they?
One of the challenges of studying marine mammals is that we typically only see what's going on at the surface. But while they're down on a deep dive, we can hear the sounds that they make. So a lot of species use echolocation, for example, to find prey, to navigate, detect obstacles in the water. So sound is very important for these animals because vision is very limited underwater.
Please. And would the three authors stand up? Well done. Brilliant. Congratulations. My second group of shortlisted features have a common theme. They're all about fathers. In every one of these three programmes, though, it's not an affectionate portrait of dear old dad that we hear, but a searing and bleak indictment of a life. For example, there's Matthew Temporal's Ollie, made for Goldsmiths, University of London, which presents the testimony of 95-year-old Olwyn Pratt. Olwyn's young life in Yorkshire was marked by hardship and brutality, often at the hands of her father. Judges praised the programme's emotional intensity. The violence is shocking, but Olwyn is a great storyteller. I'm so moved, remarked another judge. It's horribly dark. I had to listen all through twice. The Dad in Family Tree by Lydia Kenny of University College London was a serial womanizer who's found to have had several relationships in his lifetime which had resulted in hitherto undiscovered children. Judges liked the mystery element. It's delicately and beautifully made and unfolds simply and mysteriously, an excellent piece, brilliantly structured. And the first extract we'll hear from is from Our Dad by Thea Rickard of Goldsmiths, University of London. Thea's programme is a joint effort by Thea's siblings and herself to explore and perhaps explain the strange and often violent life of their late father. Judges called it captivating and horrifying, well-written and considered, a properly structured and layered piece.
This is a story. Well, it did really happen. But this is one of those stories that we wish hadn't. This is the story of Jonathan Rickard, our dad. Would you have described him as abusive?
Yes, definitely.
Dad had 3 wives and 5 children, like a pocket-sized Henry VIII. I'm the youngest. You've already heard the voices of 2 of my other siblings, and there's one other coming. Was Dad ever violent towards your mum?
I think so, yes.
I didn't really know my father at all. I mean, he was quite remote and quiet, so I didn't think I knew him much. But after he died, I realised I didn't know him at all. Not at all. My father never talked about his previous marriages and children, and neither did my mother. I think my father had buried them so deep that he didn't even think about them.
And he jumped out of his chair. My mum was washing our Norman, knocked the bowl of water over, come and smacked me in the face. And I thought, you bugger, and I got him and I given him a bath. And I got a knife off the table. And I said, if you ever touch my mother or any of these kids, you'll wish you'd never been born. And I threw the knife on the table, and I walked from our house down Carhill to Doris's. And I said to Harry, I says, I've nearly killed my dad. And he jumped up, and he says, you what? I said, I've nearly killed my dad.
Big applause, please, and 3 standing. Where are they? Where are you? Congratulations. So that was the bleak world of Ollie. Bleak indeed. Bleakness was quite a theme this year, perhaps one wonders why, with stories about knife crime, violence against women, and in lighter vein, the working life of a man who embalms dead bodies. 2 stories of aspects of our harsh world made it through to this shortlist. Harassment Architecture by George Ruskin of Goldsmiths, University of London, told the story of a homeless man's experience of how the world is designed to make his existence even harder. The judges commented, what is excellent about this piece is the perspective. It makes the listener see the world from one singular point of view, with wonderful stereo illustrations to bring the words to life. Second in this little package is Losing Faith by Annie Keats, also from Goldsmiths, which tells the story of a woman who was brought up in a family of devout Jehovah's Witnesses, but who, as a teenager, lost her faith and left the order, putting huge strain on her family. Judges praised this really good piece. I was engaged throughout. A horrific story of how the religion controls its members. A fascinating subject.
When Jehovah determines that someone has sinned against the Spirit, there's no forgiveness possible. That one's relationship with Jehovah has been forever ruined. Jehovah discards the person like a piece of garbage, just like Judas, the son of destruction.
So the process of leaving and kind of telling my parents was kind of complicated. I remember I just woke up kind of one day and was like, that's it. And I didn't go to the meeting that day. And I remember I kind of turned to my mum and was like, I think I was kind of laughing because I was so awkward. And I was like, yeah, I'm not coming today. And I didn't go to one after that. If I had been baptised and left after, I wouldn't be speaking to my mum or my sisters. To be honest with you, I don't know if I'd have had the balls to leave after I'd been baptised, just because I would have been so scared to lose my family.
The high-pitched alarms are just to convince that person that's sleeping in that doorway or in that shed or in that barn or wherever they're sleeping that that's not a good place to sleep, because that alarm is going to go off whenever they move, whenever they look up, whenever they move, the lights come on, the alarms go off, and it disrupts their night's sleep, so they end up going somewhere else. The problem is that those high-pitched alarms and those lights that come on because of movement are gradually becoming everywhere. Why overdo the surveillance, and why overdo the alarms? Why overdo everything else, which is disturbing the sleep of everybody that's in that area if it's residential? Just pull back on it, and instead of investing that money into doing extra alarms and everything else, actually invest in helping reduce homelessness.
Big applause for Annie and George. Congratulations both. And so we come to my final clutch of programmes on the Charles Parker Award shortlist for 2023. In this trio of clips, you'll hear very, very different aspects of the human condition, about as intimate, the most intimate relationship, about the nature of Irishness, as reflected in the language, and first up, a joyous story of a group of fans of the Osmonds pop group from way back. The schoolgirls won a competition to record a song about their idols called I Want to Be Donny's Girl. Of the final fanfare by Dom Brown of the University of Sunderland, the judges said, "What a blast! An interesting subject, well put together and evocative of the time. This simple piece works brilliantly because of the sheer power of the women's presentation." In complete contrast, Christina Hardinge's Life Partners for University College London invites us into the very heart of an intimate relationship. In many ways, the most personal and complex relationship. That of a person with their own body. In this piece, the body is B. We all thought it wasn't a body. We didn't realise it. It's a clever piece of duplicity there. But anyway, a character whose challenges and trials are documented in intimate detail. Judges said this programme was original, brave, insightful, well-written and well-made. It has very resonant moments and is beautifully realised acoustically. The final programme on this year's shortlist takes us across the Irish Sea to explore Ireland's relationship with its national language. Irish, by Alice Whaley of Goldsmiths, University of London, talks to people for whom the language represents far more than simply a means of communication. It's a life force, in effect. Our 6 judges said of this programme, beautiful and evocative use of music and language, with very strong speakers who express themselves with warmth and colour and are very well recorded.
I think there's a lot of people who recognise that the Irish language gives them a strong sense of identity, which it does. And, there's a crisis of identity in many ways at the moment, not just for people in the north of Ireland, but for people all over the island of Ireland and any colonised state. The language gives you a pathway back to a stronger and richer cultural identity.
One of my favourite poets is Linda Chona. I like the beginning of the poem especially, where she speaks about I put my hope swimming in this little boat of language. And I think there's something about the placement of that word dóchas, the hope, that is very much a part of Irish tradition, and it's very much part of what keeps people engaged in Irish. And because there must have been times where there was less hope, and yet the language is never abandoned fully and it keeps going, and I think she articulates that well.
Every Saturday, we would gather up our pocket money, walk to the shops, and flick through so many different magazines. All of them were screaming how to be different. Girls the same age as me and B, but so slim you could see their bones. B did not look like that. It wasn't just the magazines. These messages were everywhere. Like a song that everybody sang. B was pretty, but fat. Big. Too much. Teachers would say it, friends would say it, family. It's like a sticker that never came off. It just stayed stuck.
It was fast after that. I can't remember the months, but I do know that it was before the summer holidays and me starting at secondary school, because there was such excitement when I went back to school, or when I started secondary school, because it had been all in the papers and everything. So I think it was literally a matter of a few months that they got us to London, and we stayed in this posh Hendon Hall hotel.
We got chauffeured in and out to recording studios.
Unbelievable then, but there was no such thing as pools in hotels, but there was an outdoor pool. We went down by train and all expenses paid.
One of the things you think of is it's the first time I'd ever eaten Kentucky Fried Chicken. I mean, that is, a silly little thing that sticks in your mind. I mean, nowadays, in these days of, the X Factor and pop idols and everything, people take it with a pinch of salt, I think. But in those days, all those years ago, it was just something that you would never have dreamt.
And a roar of applause. And 3 standing. Can everybody stand up now? All the shortlistees. Brilliant. Well done, everybody. Congratulations. But now we don't know. You'll have to keep you on. We'll keep you on tenterhooks for the rest of the day. So thank you. I now move on to Andy. Kellie.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much. And we'll have to wait till about 3:20 to find out who the winners are, and of course who the gold winner is. Looking forward to that. So at Charles Parker Day, we celebrate the past, present and future in feature making, and the prize, of course, is very much looking to the future. Right now, in our next session, we're going to look at the present, because we are really delighted to have with us Alan Hall and Phoebe McIndoe from one of the most award-laden independent production companies in the country, Falling Tree. They are the creative minds behind so many productions, including Josie Long's Shortcuts and Laura Barton's Notes from a Musical Island, which in its first episode featured the music of Sunderland. But they're not here to talk about that today. They're here to talk about another Radio 4 series they have made. It's called Lights Out. It's a late-night documentary strand which engages with challenging subjects, creative treatments, and the narrative form. So, to tell us more, please give a warm welcome to Alan and Phoebe.
Hello, this is working. Good. Right. Well, mostly we're here for Phoebe. I'm just going to do a sort of setup. But I should say, if anyone hasn't heard of Falling Tree Productions, where have you been for 25 years? We're 25 years old this month, which makes me feel really creaky. Anyway, but we're here really, I should just sort of set it up. So as well as those sorts of programs, Shortcuts particularly, we've done a whole range of documentary production, music features for BBC networks and elsewhere. But we're going to focus on particularly Lights Out today, because we spent a long time, it's been going for 5 years, and Lights Out is a strand which isn't like the other things we've done. So it's championing and showcasing modes of storytelling from a kind of rich, sometimes forgotten history of radio production. So in some ways it goes back to Charles Parker and the radio ballads. There's no host. There's no one saying, in this program, we're going on a journey. There's none of that. You're quite often just sort of thrown into a montage. And it invites a closer listen. And so just thinking about previous programs and why they exist, in part it's tapping into that sort of British or European tradition of feature making, which has sometimes been forgotten and overtaken by sort of host-led, linear, narrative-driven kind of podcasting that's sort of overwhelmed us in recent years. It wants to sort of make the most of what the medium uniquely can do, I think. That's the sort of thing we can say at a conference. Can't really say that in most arenas, but we can say it here among people who know vaguely what I'm talking about. And I'm thinking that there are one or two examples of the current series which went out over Christmas and New Year, which was series 5. It was the first one to be podcast, which has always been our ambition, that it should become a podcast that sort of floats free of the network so that it can be appreciated by other people. It took us 5 years to get Radio 4 to do that, but it happened in the end. But there are 22 of these programs available to listen to at the moment. And one of the key things is that 16 of them have been made by people under 35, which we think is a pretty good thing. One of whom, apart from the one with me here today, one of whom was Hannah Dean, who won the Charles Parker Prize, I think, 5 years ago. And she again came to work with us, and she made a program about nuclear testing veterans, which, having been in Lights Out, then became a series that Radio 4 commissioned, which actually helped change government policy. So I do this thing when whenever I talk in public, I get quite emotional. Anyway, so that's Hannah. And then in the recent run, I'll get to Phoebe very quickly, but in the recent run we've done, essentially the idea is that these programs are looking at stories in the news agenda, but from a slightly different perspective or from an unusual perspective. And of one of them, it was written, I quite like this, but with, I hope the Today programme will forgive me. We did one about ageing activists, climate activists, which was described by one reviewer as going beyond the tediously reductive framing of this issue usually employed on the Today programme, which I quite liked. But we're really here for Phoebe, who's going to talk to us about a programme that she made with Redzi Bernard, who was one of the judges. So I'm going to ask you, first of all, to introduce the subject, because it's quite complicated. It's about county lines, drug trafficking.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be here today. I just want to say first, I'm really excited. Radio is so cool that you can kind of squeeze all of these different ideas and themes and play it out through sound and hopefully touch people. So it's an honor to be here. And this program that I made with Redzi, thanks to Alan and Elle, is on the theme of county lines. And so I thought I'd just set up the context a bit first, and then we'll hear 2 or 3 of the clips, and then maybe Alan will ask some follow-up questions. But so county lines, my kind of personal interest in the story started, and I'll refer to my notes so I don't forget parts that might be important. But how this story began for me on a personal level was one morning where I got a phone call from my mum. And it was quite early, and she said, oh, your brother's been missing for 48 hours or something like this. And he had kind of gone missing before, so that wasn't a kind of rare thing, and he was often in trouble. But it was sort of now he was away for a long time, and suddenly we were kind of engaging with making missing posters and putting them up in our neighborhood. And then the police were round at the house, and they said, oh yes, he's involved in with a London gang. And this was how I kind of got into the subject of county lines. And before then, I was very kind of oblivious to what it was and what it meant. So I didn't know anything about the drug trade, but county lines refers to the numbers that you call if you want a bag of cocaine or a bag of marijuana, then you'll call up your kind of local dealer. And 2 weeks later, the police found my brother living in what they call a cuckooed property. And these are the kind of properties that get taken over by gangs. And usually it's vulnerable people living there, or elderly people, or drug users. And when my brother came back from that encounter, it was really like he was a changed person. It was like the same boy, or that he looked like the same boy, but completely different. And he didn't talk about his experience at all, but that kind of set a whole motion in trajectory. So he didn't talk about how kind of young people get groomed into it, or the sense of kind of belonging that you then feel with a gang. So all of this is to say, this is why I got interested in county lines, and I wanted to kind of explore it through the program. And so Redzi and I started reaching out to people. We spoke to one woman called Jess, who was living inside one of these cuckooed properties. And we spoke to one boy who'd kind of been groomed himself. So the first clip that we're going to play is Jess. She was a woman who was held within one of these cuckooed properties for 8 months before being released. And you'll also hear my voice, which is a bit woven through the documentary. And it's kind of questions that I wrote to my brother in these periods where he would kind of go missing or be involved. So it's my slightly naive questions of, where are you, and are you okay? And these are my memories of you. So that's what you'll hear in the first clip, and then we can talk more about it maybe.
I had gone to the shop, it was February, so it was dark. And as I was putting my key into the lock, I felt something really cold on my neck. There were 2 gang members behind me, and one was holding a machete to my neck. And they said, stay calm, walk upstairs, and we won't hurt you. So I walked upstairs really calmly, let myself into my flat. They shut the door, snatched my keys off me, said, this is our yard now, bitch. Sit in the corner and be quiet and you won't get killed.
I remember how you liked to take long hot baths with Mum and Dad's expensive bath oil, and how you didn't like people singing happy birthday to you. I remember on our holidays to the coast how you would stand on the high rocks and were too afraid to jump.
When I got the chance, I had my phone. I wrote into a Google search bar, how do you get drug dealers out of your home? And that's when I learned about the term county lines, and that's when I learned about cuckooing. And it's happening constantly in every single county up and down the country. There are vulnerable adults that have their home taken over by gangs of drug dealers from normally inner cities, big inner cities, and use it as a base to sell drugs from. It was like a well-oiled machine. They would do shift work. So there were 12 gang members, but they continuously rotated. And they were always bringing in minors that they'd exploited, and they would brag about how they'd hung around at the children's home waiting for the next runaway.
Stu. So, County Lines, this is a story that was in the press quite a lot about 4 years ago and has been treated and reported on as a journalistic story. But what did you feel you were able to do making it within the lights out space, Phoebe?
I think, first of all, the space was, I was really lucky in that I knew that I was interested in this topic, but I didn't know much about it myself. And as you can hear from that, nobody really knows about it, even the people who are in it. It's a really chaotic and confusing topic. And within this space, it was given, okay, here's a chance to explore it. So I didn't have a kind of storyboard or a full structure, which was fantastic because then there was lots of space to go out and interview different people. So across this half-hour documentary, you hear 4 voices, but in reality, we spoke to lots of people who were involved and people who were kind of still scared to have their voice on air, but in some way, all those voices that you don't hear in that kind of help shape the form of the documentary and what we ended up telling. So I think the freedom of the space was brilliant. It was really cool.
So it wasn't an idea you had to have fully formed to pitch? Because when you came to us, you said, we want to do something sort of about county lines.
Yes.
I said, is that drug dealing?
Yeah, exactly. So it gave that nice freedom.
And then what form did you find? I mean, how did you then settle on what you began to achieve, this sort of the testimony of the people involved in it and then your own kind of interjections?
I think Redzi and I may have been really annoying to work with because Alan was the exec and I sent about 60 versions and each version was called version 59. And in this one, the story's completely different. And Alan was like, I'm a bit confused. It's really changed from 3 versions ago. But it was so big and there was so much to explore. And I wasn't going to put my own voice into it. And then at a certain point, we felt that maybe it was more honest in terms of why I was also interested in it. And it kind of in some ways showed this layering up of worlds because my world felt so different to some of the worlds that I was encountering through people who were involved in county lines. And I think that's an honest reflection of how many families experience it. Suddenly you'll have a brother or a kid or someone who's involved and you're suddenly kind of forced to confront a world that was always there that somehow you were able or privileged enough not to see before. So we started kind of speaking to some young people, speaking to people who were at the top of these kind of drug gangs. And then the next clip that you're going to hear introduces a few more of the voices. So you've got Reese, who's a young boy. He's 20 now in this, but he started kind of in county lines when he was about 8 years old. He was groomed from the street, so he was really young when he got into it. And this clip that you'll hear is his experience living in one of these cuckooed properties. And it's woven in with the voice of Jess, who you heard at the beginning. She was a kind of vulnerable adult whose house was taken over. And this scene kind of describes a moment of chaos in one of these houses where drugs are kind of being sold and bought in. And we tried to show this kind of weird sense of timelessness and confusion, and you have all these traumatic things going on around you, but you're kind of... it's moving too fast.
Should we hear it and then you can perhaps talk about the production of it in a way?
So at that point I started to think like, hold on a minute, I'm not here for a day or two, I'm here until I've made them enough money and that they're satisfied. I didn't have access to change clothes, I didn't have access to a shower, hot meal, so yeah, because imagine just like roughing it.
Do you cook for the people that you live with? Do you live with people? Do you still listen to Gold Dust?
That would just keep going 24 hours a day, constantly, never stop.
Working 20 hours a day, 7 days a week. I was having to use drugs to keep me alert.
Halfway in, they started drugging me to keep me quiet. It was a sedative, but it also had hallucinogenic effects. I didn't know what was real and what wasn't.
The hardest part was to know what planet that I was on. 5-6 days without sleeping, just blacked out for that whole time.
I was so sleep deprived. Am I mad? Like, what's going on?
Did you enjoy your 21st birthday?
Stabbing them.
They were really violent individuals.
Armed with acid and stuff like this.
Have you been in love?
And he was absolutely covered in blood, drenched in it. He was holding a knife and it was dripping.
What do you laugh about?
Stressing and worrying. The police are going to raid the property or a rival gang's going to...
Do you get drunk with your friends?
There's not a single part of my skin that was the normal colour. I was black, blue, purple, yellow, from head to toe.
The violence has always been there, but it wasn't until last time.
It was just hell. It was hell.
Would you like to have kids? Do you already have kids? What are your dreams?
I should have been much quicker at saying that I wasn't at all annoyed by working with Phoebe and Redzi on this. It was a complete privilege to see this very complex subject with so many different perspectives and dimensions to it and different aspects to it and the characters, and see it sort of take form in a way. And I want you to tell us a little bit more about that scene, because as well as doing the research, having the personal involvement in it, and doing the basic stuff like recording interviews and cutting stuff together, you made the music.
So we tried with the music. I think we were trying to listen to things that would come up in the interviews. So I think at the beginning, Jess had described one of the gangs as a kind of well-oiled machine, and I think that sent Redzi and I into a spin of finding kind of industrial sounds or cityscapes, and so we were kind of collecting sounds there. And then we've always enjoyed mucking around with the music, and me and my brother used to listen to a lot of Gold Dust in the car, so I think that was kind of in my head as like, you know, a nice moment as well that we'd shared, so that kind of found its way into the soundtrack somehow. And then we'd go on GarageBand. I spent a lot of time at my laptop making weird ooh, and then layering it up over and over. And that was like, that's a real joy of the creative side of it. I found kind of making those atmospheres, or in scenes where you don't have the words for it, or you want to create a mood. I think moving into radio, that's also been one of the most exciting things, is, as I'm sure everyone feels too here, is creating those nice sound worlds.
Can we do a very quick detour that we didn't talk about,
Oh, yeah.
actually, which is that what brought you to this point was that you'd previously made another Lights Out last year, which was about child sexual abuse, so pretty heavy stuff again. Yeah. But before that, you and Redzi, and you tell us a bit about how you two had sort of come together, and you worked on a Shortcuts, or a few of those.
So we met on something called ELAN, which was the audio it was an audio network that was set up online during the pandemic on Facebook. And that was B. Duncan and Tess Davidson, and they did an amazing job. And you can kind of go onto these online spaces and link up with different new producers. And so we met on one of those Facebook groups, and I think something about Zoom just gave me more courage to reach out to people afterwards. So I said to Redzi, let's go on a walk. Let's team up, because we had similar styles and interests. And so after that, we thought we would dab our hands into making a podcast, which we did. And
what's that called?
It was called Telling Stories, and we interviewed kind of different radio makers about their style of making things. And that was a really brilliant process to go through. If anyone is up for it, it's an exciting journey figuring out how to make the podcast and go on Canva and create your own stuff. So if you haven't done it and you're toying with the idea, do it.
But we're not here to talk about that. Yeah. We're here to talk about Lights Out, BBC Radio 4, produced by Falling Tree Productions. Let's get back to this production in particular. And now what I was trying to make was the point that having come through Elan, you started to make shortcuts as a sort of nursery slope in a way.
Yes, that was
to
fantastic.
Get your first sort of production on the broadcast, and then we just took a bet, didn't we? Really on the Last Taboo with the child sexual abuse program, based on the fact that you had the most amazing contributor. Do listen; it's online, The Last Taboo. But we should get back to this because we've got a couple of minutes just to set up this last third clip, and what you were trying to do, what the format allowed you to do with this subject.
Yeah. So the third and final clip is you'll hear Jess. It's very short, and she's spent 8 months in her house with this gang. And at a certain point, the police come, and she describes this scene where she thinks she's about to be rescued, but in fact gets arrested, because throughout the documentary, there's always this blur between victim and perpetrator that comes up. And I think we wanted to create space in this moment to kind of, this was a huge moment for her and her story, so I think we tried to use kind of sound in a way to give some space to this moment so you can hear it.
So I think, just before we do that, I think the point of it was that you approached this subject, county lines, drug trafficking, which we'd sort of heard bits of in the press and TV and so on, but you end up treating it factually, so there's a lot of information contained within this documentary, but you're also very conscious of the feeling, and not the feeling just of the people in the program, but how it's impacted on the listener. So I'm interested in that, and then the conclusion in a way, which is that this isn't a criminal justice issue. This is a social issue, right? Yeah. I've answered that question myself, but you can have a go.
That's good. No, that's good. We can hear the clip.
I believed that the police had come and they were rescuing me, so I believed I was getting rescued. So I was just, I was floating with happiness. And then I was put in the back of a police van, and the door slammed, and we got to custody, and they booked me in. And I got put in a cell, and I just thought, oh. I had no idea that they'd not arrested any of the gang members because they believed that I was the one that was the criminal. They didn't get arrested until 2 years later.
Just going to ask one final question, given that Phoebe not only was a co-producer on it, but was very connected to the story. I mean, how did you feel, having gone through the process of making this programme, how did that inform your own sort of thoughts about the issue and your brother?
I felt really honoured to make the programme because I think there was a study back in 2021 that said something like 27,000 young people are involved in county lines across the UK. And that's only kids who've been kind of reported, and that's only the kids, and there's also adults, and there's so many people. And it was a topic that I didn't know much about, and I you know, and I carry a lot of emotion around it. And to talk to people who'd kind of had that experience and to listen to their stories was such a huge privilege, and to kind of learn more about it. And I developed so much more empathy with my brother, who I was so angry with, because, you know, he was always in trouble and always, you know, wielding knives at us and very violent and aggressive. And to go through that shift in feeling empathy for people. Or there's another guy in the documentary who you don't hear called Ken, who's kind of a villain. But he's not, you know, he'd gone through exactly the same journey as a kid. And of course, I think we know that, you know, about the way that crime works. So to be given the space on radio to explore that was incredible.
That's our 27 minutes, 30 seconds. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, thanks. Thank you. And crucially, are there episodes of Lights Out available to hear on BBC Sounds? Hurrah. Do go and find that and have a listen. Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, so to chair our next session, I'd like to introduce somebody with a deep understanding of the nature of audio storytelling, possibly best known to us as a radio actor, the voice of Ruth in Radio 4's The Archers. But she's also a respected and accomplished documentary maker and a visiting professor here at the University of Sunderland. So please welcome Felicity Finch.
Yeah.
Can you get them down?
Or do I? I should be able to project, shouldn't I? Yes, as an actor. Yes, so I'm chairing this session because Kellie is actually going to be one of the people speaking on the panel. Because it's about the 21st Century Folk Project. So I'd like to get everybody that's going to be included on the stage first. So we have Michael Dodds here and Andrea Bell, and I'll tell you a little bit more about them in a second. So Kellie, if you could take a seat, and Sean Cooney. Okay. So Kellie is the executive producer of this project, which was inspired by the radio ballads, produced, of course, as we've said, by Charles Parker. And at their heart were the voices of ordinary working people. And we have Andrea Bell, I'm so happy they're here today, Andrea Bell and Michael Dodds, who are both from Sunderland and have both had songs written about them as part of this project. And we have Sean Cooney.
Hello.
Hi, Sean, who is one of the songwriters for the project. He's also a folk singer, a storyteller, a broadcaster, and of course a member of the award-winning band, the Young Uns. And he wrote one of the songs about a Middlesbrough GP, as well as helping in some of the project's development. And dare I say, maybe most importantly, he's from Stockton-on-Tees, which is where I'm also from. So Kellie, let's come back to you. So Kellie, the 21st Century Folk Project was your idea. How did you first get the idea, and how did you sell it?
Two good questions. So it was a response to a challenge set to us by Radio 2. So this is a BBC Radio 2 project. And how can we retain the essence of the radio ballads and what was at the heart of the radio ballads, but create some content that is going to work in 2023 on linear, on digital, in vision, and on social. So it was kind of a 360-degree project. So in a way that kind of dictated to a certain extent the form that some of the content would take. So we just we thought, okay, so at the heart of this is hearing the stories of people living in Britain today. So how do we do that? And we decided to put the call out there and ask people to come forward and get in touch with us, tell us about their lives. And we thought, shall we do this for the whole country, or should we just focus on one area? Because it might be nicer to focus on one area and get more of a picture of one part of the country. And so that's why we ended up with the North East. broadly speaking.
So I was going to ask you, why was it Radio 2 and why the Northeast?
Well, Radio 2 commissioned the radio ballads that we made in 2006 and around the Olympic Games in 2012 and a few other bits and bobs. So Radio 2 has always been a big supporter of folk music. We produce the weekly folk show and have done for a long time, as well as lots of other folk music programs. So I guess as a production company, we have the experience and the skills in that area. So it's just something that ever since I've been working on radio has always been on Radio 2. So it just felt like the natural, and the folk show felt like the natural home for it.
And the Northeast, was it particularly?
Why not? I mean,
why not?
To be honest, we just thought, there's a great tradition of folk music, isn't there, in this part of the country, and so why not? We've got to choose somewhere. We knew that we could call on people like Sean, who was a shoe-in from day one, to come and work on the project. So we just thought it would be a good place to start.
So how did you choose the people that would be involved, that the songs would be written about?
So I think crucially, the most important thing to me was that we reflected in a really faithful way what people were telling us about their lives in 2022, which was when we did this outreach piece of work. And so many people talked to us about hardship, about financial hardship, about homelessness. I have to say about probably 10% of people that got in touch with us were talking about neurodiversity and struggling with autism spectrum conditions. And so we wanted to make sure that we wanted to reflect what people were telling us, and that was our principle. And in the end, we just picked the 5 that we thought, A, had great stories to tell, but B, had the personalities to be able to go on this journey with us, because it's a big thing to ask someone like Andrea, who's not used to being on the radio and on the telly, to kind of get involved. So, but essentially it was a reflection of what we felt people were telling us about their lives in modern day Britain.
And what were the main obstacles, if any, that you had to overcome to get it out there?
Yeah, musician availability, number 1, because we'd just come out of a period of a couple of years when bands like Sean's band, the Young Uns, just hadn't been able to gig. And so everyone was rescheduling all their tours, it felt like, throughout 2022. I know it sounds really boring and practical, but that was probably the biggest obstacle, is getting musicians to be available when we needed them.
Gosh. Okay, so Andrea, you run the Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen, and it's also a food bank.
It is, yeah. It's a little bit. We've been going 4 years, and it's kind of got a little bit bigger than that, including county lines. So yes, it's got a bit bigger.
And Michael, you're the 5th generation of your family to be a Foy boatman in the port here in Sunderland. And day and night you help ships from around the world to moor on the quayside.
That's correct, yeah. 5th generation.
Yeah. So Foy, for anyone that doesn't know, Foy means...
A fee.
Yeah.
A fee for a boatman.
Okay.
Goes back to sailing boats.
So I'm just going to go back to Andrea now and your song. It was written by the renowned singer-songwriter Martin Joseph, and it's called Albert's Place.
Yes.
What was it like being a part of this project? We'll play a bit of it in a minute.
Well, initially, just meeting Martin was just incredible. He was like a best friend from day one. He was really good. And he was touring America at the time, so we were liaising backwards and forwards with stories and where did we come from and what was it all about and what did we do and all this sort of stuff. And then with this just special friendship, formed. And then when the song came out, it just really did. He did listen to everything that I said, so it was really good. Really.
Should we play a clip from it? I think we should now.
Watch me cry. Oh.
See the pensioner and the veteran, the unemployed, the homeless, and the lost, the confused, misused, refused, gathered here. But you'd be surprised at who's beside you, businessman just wants to feed his kids. A nurse ashamed to cross that line, but arms welcome her. And Albert's place has seen it all. The meeting call when the big ship's called. But maybe now its greatest day of all brings tea in a cup of love. Tea in a cup of love.
Sorry, I try to be tough, it doesn't work.
So beautiful, isn't it? So
Yeah,
beautiful.
Absolutely. Do you feel able to talk a little bit about what it felt like in the moment when Martin first played it for you?
I think it said it all, didn't it? I went there armed with the toughness that I'd come across in the soup kitchen, and the words just kept coming out. And just a little bit of the story, there was a lady, before I started the soup kitchen, she was inspirational. She was left alone, and I went to get her a cup of tea, and I went back with a cup of tea saying, there's a cup of tea made with love. And thought nothing of it till she put her hand up and said, could you get me another cup of tea made with love? So he picked that up, and it's kind of been the philosophy of the way we work, dignified, no questions. We don't drum any, they just come in, it's, do you want this or do you want this? So her inspiration brought his words into inspiration is how we work. So it just works as a pattern, basically.
How important do you think this song is?
Well, in the current climate, I don't think people are quite understanding people's hardship. We get lots of employed people, and everybody has a stigma about a soup kitchen, that they're a certain type of person, and that they're just not. They're people who come across not all of the time, and it's become a bit of a community who are very well known now. And okay, maybe a person can afford that bowl of food, but they've seen no one all day. So we say, well, how's your dog? How's your this? How's your that? So it's a bit more than a soup kitchen, if I'm honest.
What do you think the song captures? What do you think it encapsulates for you?
Well, what it was beautiful is obviously the building we're in was a former butcher who was very infamously wonderful in the East End. He used to feed people who were hungry, and he would give them extra food because he knew that family didn't have food. So it just kind of works around the philosophy and how we work. And it was when the ships used to come in, he was they provided all of the meat for the ships and things. So it just he took the whole concept of everything we spoke about, but made it more than just it was a bit of a historical journey of probably 50 or 60 years rather than just what was happening now. And it just got together. It put it together, and it was perfect. It was beautiful.
So Michael, we'll move on to you for a minute. It was the acclaimed singer-songwriter Catherine Williams that collaborated with squeeze musician Chris Difford for your song, and it's called Foy Boatmen.
Right.
What was it like for you to be a part of the project?
Well, it was unusual. I got a lot of stick about it.
From who?
From mates, family, friends, everybody.
From the other Foy Boatmen?
Yeah, and all the dockers, they all cheered me when I came back on and asked for mock autographs, and there was things made up and videos and God knows what. So I got tortured, basically. But I went along with it. I just came about it, I don't know if it was on social media or the news. Anybody got an unusual job, get in touch. And that's how Foy Boatman is an unusual job. Not so unusual that it's all over the world. I think it's the title. And the title comes from a foy, a fee for a boatman. And last century, we would, my great-great-great-grandfather, God knows what that is, would have to sail down to as far as Whitby and approach a ship that was bound for the northeast, ask him if he was going to Sunderland, and they would arrange a fee, to tie the ship up. So then they would strap alongside the ship, come up to Sunderland with the ship, beat the ship in, and be waiting at the quayside to tie the ship up. And that's anybody could do it. So in the olden days, they would maybe do a couple of ships and then go missing for a few days on the drink. So you would never see them again. Or, like I say, anybody could be a pilot as long as you knew the sandbars or anything in the river. So we became an association in 1922, and then it was just a family business from then on. It was about half a dozen families involved, and I'm the last family from the 5th generation of my family.
And you work with is it your...
Well, I've got daughters, so the name's stopping with me.
Your brother-in-law's, is it? Or your brother-in-law's son?
It's my son-in-law.
Yes, son-in-law.
My son-in-law
right.
married my eldest daughter. I've just taken him on as a partner last year, but he's got a son. So for all the name will skip a generation, the bloodline will still be there. Yeah. And I've just found out last week, so I thought he was a bit more intelligent, basically, to be a foy boatman, too intelligent. And he's just told me last week that he wants to be a foy boatman, so I brought a tea to me eye. Yeah. So hopefully he's going to carry on the tradition.
Yeah. Shall we hear a clip of the song?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
The foy boatmen wait to seal a wage to make their day. The cold wind comes off in the sea, and their boats begin to sway. Row the boats against the waves, row the boats to guide the ship that docks with steel and coal on tender winter tides. Row the boats, row the boats, row the boat all day. Secure the line and take me home, I hear the captain say. The foy boatmen grapple chains, and they meet at the crack of...
I haven't got tears. I'm all right.
But what was the moment like for you?
Great, because that was the first time I actually heard it.
Yeah.
And it was emotional, I must admit. Yeah. There's a couple of lines in it where a captain would shout down, a local captain, hurry up, I do want to get home. You'd have crew members from Sunderland. And a lot of ships is only in port maybe one day. So they would want to get home, say their wives and family. So they'd want you to get it tied up as quickly as possible. And there'd be away home to the wives and then back the next day to sail wherever they were going.
So did you think the song really encapsulated?
Yeah, there's a few
your
lines
world?
in it. There's a line that wasn't actually in there. It was cutthroat and ruthless when me dad first started, when you would have different families and vying for trade. So there was a lot of fights, really, where you were fighting for your livelihood, basically. So it was this... There's a lot of history where there would be skullduggery went on, put it that way.
So that world's now been recorded, so it's an important song.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I'm taking out of it. It's going to be there forever. And,
Yeah.
you know, you've got the recording of it and you can't pass it on and say, well, there was a song made about my job. Yeah.
Thank you.
And I've had recognition from other foy boatmen saying, great, because we're sick of getting people asking us, what's a foy boatman? And they can just say, listen to the song.
Know. Okay, so Sean, you wrote one of these songs.
I did, yeah.
And it's about Dr. Ifty Lowe from Normanby, near Middlesbrough,
Yeah.
who'd been a GP in the local area for almost 50 years.
That's right.
And so can you tell us about the process that you went through to write the song? And importantly, why it's called Dr. Borough?
Yeah, well, I think with the Doctor, this incredible personality, he was a real kind of community hero. He's been a GP for 50 years, still working, he won't retire. And I think with him, it was other people who kind of suggested him for the project. So he wasn't really kind of aware of what the thing was. And so when I turned up in his office in one day last September to interview him, he thought I was trying to write a song about what it's like to be a doctor, not realising that I was going to ask questions about him. And his amazing life and the things he does, but But what drew me to his story was the fact that he's a massive football fan, and I grew up being obsessed with football, and his office is decorated in like the colours of Middlesbrough Football Club, and that's a big way of how he kind of breaks down barriers with his patients, and his male patients in particular, and so the challenge to write a song about the Doctor was, it almost felt like it's a song about him, but it's a song about the team, it's a song about the town and all the change in times that he'd seen. And also, within recent years, you know, Dr. Lone got COVID in early 2020, and he was in intensive care for 9 days. And there's an incredible video of him on social media coming out from the hospital, and the corridors being lined with nurses, and they're all cheering, and it was such a beautiful moment. But it was incredibly difficult trying to write the song, and it took weeks and weeks of kind of thinking about different ways of getting into telling the story. And thankfully, when we performed it to him, as you'll see in a minute, in his own sitting room with our shoes off, it was quite a moment. But I agree with what Michael was saying about like getting a lot of stick for stuff. I mean, there was a funny comment someone made, because I mean, as I think Kelly said, we were overwhelmed by the amount of media coverage that this had. I mean, Andrea's song was on the main kind of BBC News all day on that Monday, and made such an impact on people across the country. And there was an article on the BBC News website, and I was getting texts from like the dads on the school run saying, you know, you're trending on BBC News. And the headline was, a doctor who survived COVID has a folk song written about him. And so that was the thing. But the first comment on Twitter was, a fate worse than death.
Shall we hear a clip of it?
Indeed.
In this moment. Okay.
High for old St. Nye, sing one thing before we fall. It's Dr. Burr's favourite song, it's only 75 years young. Free healthcare for all. Dr. Burr can't forget the year when COVID came. 200,000 families will never be the same. And in the borough at James Cook, they thought his days were through. The doctor couldn't breathe and was sent to the ICU. Now come on, Burr's chanted like 1,000 tiny prayers. And after 9 long days and nights, he left intensive care. And the corridors were lined with smiles and cheers and tears the same. While Dr. Burr asked the nurse, have I missed a game? Sing out high for old St. Nye. Sing one thing before we fall. It's Dr. Burr's favourite song. It's only 75 years long. Free healthcare for all. When Dr. Burr met the Queen and got his MBE, he said, I bring good wishes, ma'am, from all of Normanby. And as the mad she walked away, he swears that he could see the cipher on her handbag read, ERUTB. Sing out high for old St. Nye. Sing one thing before we fall. It's Dr. Burr's favourite song. It's only 75 years long. Free healthcare for all.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think we have to explain UTB, don't we?
Oh, UTB means up the borough, yeah. But that was such a brilliant moment, and he said to us at the end, I mean, you could see him kind of talking to his wife at the end. I mean, his wife's even funnier than he is. And he said, oh, she likes it and she doesn't like anything. And it's a special relationship we've got with the doctor and his family now. I think the idea, as you asked before about the song, it was kind of combining his love of football and his sense of humour with his tremendous passion, and you know, he is one of the reasons he's continuing to work is because, you know, we all know the state of the NHS at the minute, and he's determined to hold that line, to hold that principle of free healthcare for all, 75 years and counting.
Mm. So all your work with the Young Uns is about storytelling through song. Is there anything about this project which affected you particularly?
I think we, as I said before, we were all kind of bowled over with the reaction it got, really. And for me, it felt like folk music had come home. It was connecting with people, you know. And I think a lot of people across the country have this idea that folk music is of the past and about historical things, and in many ways it is. But for me, it's always been about telling ordinary, everyday stories, and it can have such an impact on people's lives, as we've seen with these amazing songs, Andrea and Michael's songs. so for me, it was kind of just reconnecting with the roots and of folk music, what it can be and what it can mean to people, and it was just a complete joy to be involved with it.
And your latest album also has a song that has a strong connection to Sunderland on it. It's called Tiny Notes.
That's right.
Can you just tell us a little about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the album is called Tiny Notes, and the title song is inspired by this incredible young person from Sunderland, Paige Hunter, who has tied hundreds of notes onto the railings of the bridge over there, the Weymouth Bridge, over the past few years, urging people to hold on to life. And in all the time that she's done that, it's been realised that she's been responsible for saving the lives of at least 30 people. Absolutely incredible. So the album's dedicated to her.
Yeah, and the album also there are other songs on the album about unsung heroes. Yeah?
That's right, yeah. There's, many of them stories that people will be familiar with. The story of the three dads walking, Andy, Mike and Tim, who found themselves in the depths of grief after each losing a daughter to suicide in recent years, and what the dads do is talk about it, and they walk across the country, and everywhere they go they meet people and counsel people. Yesterday they met the Prime Minister with a petition to put age appropriate suicide prevention on the school curriculum. So they're absolutely inspirational, and we find ourselves as a group in a very privileged position where people come to us with these stories. You know, it was one of the dad's brothers who came to us after a show and said, I want to tell you about my brother and what he does. And so to have that trust and that connection with people, it's a real, it's a daunting responsibility, but it's a beautiful one, and one that we're really honoured to be a part of.
Thanks, Sean. So I'm going to go back to Kellie briefly. The final question. Do you have any plans to take the project further in the future?
Yep, lots of plans. I think we're all radio makers in this room, and we make programs and a success, and then of course we want to repeat them, and hopefully the commissioners or the commissioning teams will commission us to do another series of this in the future. Because as Sean said, the impact at the heart of the project was a 5 mini documentaries, one on each of the people and the stories, and there was a daily feature in the Jeremy Vine show. In Vision, as you see with the song reveal videos, a whole suite of things. And when you get the might of a station like Radio 2 behind you to help you pull all this together and reaching out to influential people at BBC News and in the press, we think we delivered in terms of impact, which is one of the key kind of measures of success. So yeah, we hope that we designed the project in such a way that we can pick it up and take it to a different part of the country. We'd really love to do the project next in Northern Ireland. We've got a few thoughts around that. So we are plugging the commissioners at Radio 2 and hoping to secure another series of the project.
Do you know when you know?
No.
No.
Of course not.
No. But they know that
of course.
They want it to have another life.
Yeah, sure. And I think there are lots of things, aren't there, that are to be considered. Each network has a creative calendar, and we were originally supposed to do this project earlier in the year, but it was clashing with lots of other things. So Radio 2 decided to put it out in January, which was great because nothing else was really happening, which I also think helped sort of drive some of that impact as well. So yeah, we very much hope to do it.
But would you have time to, if it was going to be commissioned for next January, could that happen?
Probably not. It's probably likely to be later in the year now. Just because these things take time, don't they? But yeah, maybe.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
Well, I think just to finish, I'd like to say to all of you to listen and watch these songs. They're on YouTube, aren't they? You can just Google them and they'll come up to listen to the whole of the songs because they really, really are worth it. I'd just like to say, give the final word, I think, to Andrea and Michael. Is there anything that you'd like to say, about having been part of the project, about what the song? I mean, how many people that have now heard this, your songs? Is it spread widely around Sunderland? Have they spread widely around Sunderland?
I can't walk in a supermarket. They go, you're the woman from the soup kitchen, aren't you? I go, yeah, hello. I never wear makeup anymore. They go, oh, hello. Yeah, so, the top and bottom of it, both Michael and I, we were chatting earlier, saying how patriotic we are to Sunderland. We love Sunderland. We love everything about Sunderland. So just the fact that, and the North East, sorry, we're special.
That's all right.
Yeah, don't leave Teesside out.
But we're special people.
Yeah,
There's a
absolutely.
special way that North East people are, and sometimes, I'm not saying we're forgotten, but we're not as regular as the major cities or Manchester or London, and maybe we should be. I think we should be, because we're all fighting the same causes, and we're just a little bit forgotten.
Do you want to say anything, Michael?
Couldn't follow that. No, I get asked in the street, strangers coming up to me, on the docks as well, especially with being like the nautical theme to it. You'll get a lot of people coming up that you work with, and they'll say like they heard it and they've talked about it, and it does give you a little bit of recognition. I mean, it'll all blow over eventually, like, but it's always going to be there in my family.
Well, the song will live there. I mean, the songs will live there forever.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is just a
It's
brilliant.
nice to have that recognition.
Yeah, and Sean, any final word?
Oh, I don't know, really. Just, yeah, the whole thing's just been so emotional. I mean, and just to see the responses of the people like Michael and Andrew when they heard it for the first time. Although, I mean, Michael says he was emotional in that video. It didn't look very emotional to me. I think his response was just lovely.
I've heard that before as well.
But your wife was crying, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. She was crying, yeah. She is very emotional.
Felicity, can I say one more thing, just so I've got the chance to? Kellie's a bit of a forgotten hero. I mean, she's brought us friendship, and obviously the communication-wise of things. She gave us opportunities that we would never have been able to offer in our trade as such, Michael. Yes, I mean, again, soup kitchens, yep, and Foy Boatman, yes. Again, they're not exactly, best of press, but if you could, all of you manage to have the same relationship that we managed with the people working on this project, they're friends now. They're not just people who picked you out of the thing and did something for you. We're friends. So do that for everybody else and you'll be winners.
She's all right.
Thank you. So thanks, everybody. I think it's time for tea and biscuits. Am I right? No. Oh, sorry.
No.
Sorry,
Back to
I got
me.
that wrong. Stay where you are.
Tea and biscuits coming up soon. So thanks to Felicity as well for hosting the session. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Andrea.
Thank you.
Okay. On to our next session. Peregrine Andrews, known as Pez, I think, is that right, Peregrine? Pez Andrews, sometimes. So one of the most sought-after sound designers and mixers, worked on so many productions, it's difficult to name, there's too many, but he's an award-winning producer as well in his own right through his company Moving Air. So in a few minutes, Pez is going to be showing you one of his mixing sessions for his epic, amazing Radio 4 series, My Dream Dinner Party, and he's going to explain how you can raise the dead and create conversations that could never happen. But first, I want to ask you a quick question about the kaleidoscope. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wasn't the producer of that. That was Nina Perry.
Right.
I did. It was a complex mix. I did mix it.
Yeah.
What would you like to know?
Well, I was just going to say the kaleidoscope radio feature made in the late 20s.
Get this screen up on.
Which I guess is the early days of the BBC developing an art of sound. Can you tell us a bit about it, what it is, and also about the innovation around it, how it was mixed originally?
Well, it was all about being able to fade things. Actually, it was all about. I mean, it sounds so simple. In fact, but in a pre-electric age, if you think about how would you make something louder or quieter? How would you balance things? When we had early recordings, they were done with single microphones, and the sources had to balance themselves by getting closer or further away, or playing quieter. And the concept of a fade, I mean, I think there probably are examples of composers who've attempted to do fades by getting musicians to fade themselves up by playing progressively quieter. Alan can probably cite something. No? But as soon as you could make sound, as soon as you could represent sound electrically, then suddenly you could mix sources. You could combine them very simply in a very simple electric circuit. And you could change levels, again, very simply. I mean, this is so routine now, but you can imagine what that was like when you could suddenly combine things exactly at the levels you wanted. Known then as balancing. Some older producers still do say balancing rather than mixing. That's an early BBC fader. You couldn't achieve smooth fades then because it was basically a switch with lots of resistors. So you would get lots of it would be stepping in level rather than a smooth fade. In fact, the Radiophonic Workshop were one of the first people to try and create a smooth fader. They invented something called a glow pot desk, which used light. Mixing desk would probably look something like that. So, I mean, really a lot of that was about how excited he was by being able to combine sources. And that was probably pre-even tape recording. So these would have been live sources, actually coming from different studios and then being combined in a mixer like that, probably.
Right.
And of course, combining signals, simple mixing and controlling levels are the basics of all sound mixing. That's what we do. Most of what we do is combining and obviously placing things in the right place, but as far as mixing goes, it's combination and level, and that's still what we do.
Well, from that to combining and mixing on an epic level, I'll leave you to talk about your mixing session. Thanks, Pez.
Yeah, I'll play a few clips, and then I'll sort of try and explode a session a little bit. We'll see how the time goes. So, My Dream Dinner Party. Is anyone familiar with that? It's a bonkers format. Totally bonkers. My co-producer, Sarah Peters, said, do you think we could do this thing where we create a virtual dinner party with a load of dead guests and a living host? And I said, probably not. But let's try. So, we made a pilot with Ed Balls. And initially I thought, this is never going to work. It was just taking bits of archive, slamming them against each other and trying to make something sound like a real conversation. And it didn't really. And somehow it was a bit like chipping away at a rock or something. Just a little bit of timing here, level. Gradually, something comes out of it, and you start going, I'm starting to believe that these people were really together. So we did the pilot with Ed Balls. That was in 2017. And we've now made 13 episodes. So we're about to go into series 5. The commissioner is there, right there, which should go out around September. So, living host has dinner with 5 dead guests brought back from the grave in BBC Archive. Right. That's all the episodes are still available, actually. So we've had some pretty good hosts. John Cleese, Joan Bakewell, Sophie Ellis-Bextor, who you'll hear in a minute. She was lovely. So quite a range. We like to get writers as well as actors. Obviously, comedians perform well, but we like to vary it a bit. So the challenge, well, as a sound designer, this was a big challenge. I suppose that's why I like it. You've got a load of interviews, and then you want to make them sound like conversation. It's not the same. An interview and a conversation are not the same. You've also got to try and create the impression that all these people are together in the same space, around the same dining table. And the archive, some of it's quite recent, some of it could be over 50 years old, could be very hissy. So you've got to combine all that and make it all sound like it's in the same room. So it's a big ask. And I like it as a sound design exercise because actually when you get it right, it just sounds like it really happened. It doesn't actually sound like a grand thing. It just sounds like it really happened. But it's really, really hard to make it sound like it really happened. So the process. First of all, we find a host, preferably some kind of celebrity that excites people. Then we encourage the hosts to pick guests that we can actually get archive for. So something relative within recorded history. Then we go and look and see what archive exists. It's often from Desert Island Discs. Things with in-depth interviews like that where people talk about themselves. That's always good. We also use television archives sometimes. It's all BBC. That's why we can do it. These days we also transcribe the archive, and then Sarah, my co-producer, she puts a sort of skeleton script which just has sort of chunks for the host to kind of react to, and then some hosts ad-lib it completely, some hosts like to write something, but basically we're just saying, can you get from that to that? And in fact, often less is more, because if you think about a real conversation, think about a real dinner party, often you don't have to say that much to get from one place to another, or to get from one person to another. So we do a lot of chopping right down. Some people talk a lot, and we don't need them to, really. We record the hosts ideally in their own homes. It was tricky during lockdown because we had to do a few remote sessions, but they did actually come out very well. But we like nosing around people's houses. And also, it sounds more natural. We can get people to walk around. We can get people to sort of bash saucepans, answer the door. We get the real sound of their doorbells and their cats and their pets and their children and their dogs. All of these things have featured. And then my sort of hardest task comes when I take all these bits of, this really rough edit, which doesn't sound anything like a conversation really at that point, and then I just hammer away for about a week and go mad. And then something emerges in the end. I'm going to play a bit in a minute. But this is a typical structure that we've sort of evolved. So the guests arrive, we tell you who they are in some sort of way. We try to mix it up a bit so it's not always just ding-dong and opening the front door. So we found different ways of doing it. Then, obviously, because it's a dinner party, there's food. Some of the hosts are quite into talking about food and some aren't. John Cleese just wanted a takeaway. David Baddiel, yeah, you'll hear what he did. Some want to get really deep on it, and this is a good way. With these courses, we structure the program. So we have your arrival, then you have the starter, the main. We normally like to throw some kind of stunt in now, which I'll explain in a minute, and then you have dessert, coffee, and departures. So that's the structure. So let me play you some arrivals first. Okay. So this is going to be... This is Jane Horrocks, the actress. We try to be a bit different with this one. So some of her guests are arriving in a coach, including Ian Dury, who she actually used to go out with. And he has a walking stick, so you'll hear that. Yeah.
I think I can hear them. I've organised a minibus to collect them all, so I think they're here at the door. Ooh, yikes! Hello. You've all arrived. Oh, Jacques, do you mind just helping eat? Right, thanks. Hello. Come through. Oh, Fanny, you look very glamorous.
Adore this particular turquoise, don't you?
Hi, Johnny.
That's Fanny Craddock.
Exquisite piece of embroidery, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. I feel like I should curtsy.
On the most gorgeous Duchess set.
Fanny Craddock, the first celebrity TV chef that I can remember.
So that's how we do it. We do a kind of like turning to the audience, telling you who the guests are. Get
And
that
a
out the
lovely
way.
husband and sidekick, Johnny.
No, sweetheart, I'm sorry.
Sorry,
This is what we do
right.
at home. Yes.
Very daunting, actually.
Johnny said almost nothing, so that was tricky.
They're cooking for you two tonight, so I hope you're not expecting anything gourmet. I hope it wasn't too much of a squash in the minibus.
Well,
Oh, yes, but that's fun.
That's Jacques Cousteau.
I love the company of women.
Okay, so that's one way of getting your guests in, and this is another way. This is David Baddiel. That was one of the more recent ones. So he's got Eric and Ernie turning up. That's my signature magpie. You'll always hear it.
Eric, Ernie, great to see you both. Come in.
Lovely. We'll get the drinks on the card, aren't we?
Right. Amazing.
But we rarely get away, do we? No.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you made an effort today. Come on, let me give you a hand.
What a good lad you are.
Oh, yes, you do.
Thank you very much. Let's take these to the kitchen.
So in the background, you've got Joan Rivers chatting away. So a lot of the art of this is trying to convey the sense that someone else is already in the room and another conversation is going on. That's when it starts to really sound real. So you've got, and then what we can do is we can sort of have things in the background that can then become foreground, as if you're leaning in and listening to that conversation.
There's some amazing people here I want you to meet. Toilets just down the hallway.
Good Lord, look who it is.
Ah, of course.
Eric and Ernie, meet Joan Rivers.
Here I am.
Who you'll know, obviously, out.
So there he is doing the intro. So one more maybe. This is Joan Bakewell, Dame.
Dinner parties, I love them and I hate them. I love bringing interesting people together and seeing how they mix, but then I always worry about the food and drink, especially tonight. And what a mix of people they are. Can you imagine Barbara Windsor and Barbara Castle here? Two Barbaras, both of them, well, they're very different one from the other, but they're both deeply English. That's for you.
Thank you.
And then the French sculptor, Louise Bourgeois. Now, she herself is...
So obviously these kind of sequences are pretty much completely made up. I mean, as I'll say, as I'll explain later, we don't put words in people's mouths. We don't like to do that. And some people think we do. But in these playful sequences, in these getting people a drink and getting in, there is a bit of license, obviously. And we are nicking words and thank yous and, you know, and just finding possibilities. A lot of it's accidental, really, and you suddenly see a possibility.
Legendary, but I think you'll probably know her from The Great Spider. It used to sit in the...
Louise Bourgeois, the artist.
In the Tate Turbine Hall, I remember. Louise?
Yes?
I guess you might like a whiskey on the rocks.
Perfect, perfect.
Her archive is a bit rough, but I think we get away with it.
The light is nice here.
Oh, thank you. I always like having big windows. Here, let me pass that to you.
Thank you.
Oh, Babs, can you get that door for me?
Right.
This is Barbara Windsor. Going to get the door.
That I disagree.
So we stayed with Barbara. That was the POV. We went with her to the door. So we left the other scene behind. And now we've got Kirk Douglas at the door.
Oh, goodness me.
I may not know how to sing, but I got a lot of guts.
Kirk Douglas.
Yes, I know. Where have you been all my life?
I don't know.
Just remember, this never happened.
Come on.
And all the old goodies like, you know, external atmos, cuts on the door, now we're inside, all of that good stuff.
London isn't everybody's cup of...
Okay, just finally a bit. Simon Sharma.
So everybody, help yourself to the lox, the whitefish, the olives, whatever takes your fancy.
Margaret Sanger Clinic and get yourself fitted out for birth control. And you had to have a copy of Julia Child's Mastering the Art of French Cooking.
Nora, smoked salmon?
Great.
Actually knew Julia Child. She was a lovely, lovely woman.
That's one of the sadnesses, because I have a feeling she would have been the real deal.
Yeah. She was just like everybody imagined. She was extremely sweet and jolly and rollicking on the outside. Give me a minute, would you?
Absolutely.
So, where were we?
I bought her cookbook when I...
So in this case, we've stayed with them, and Simon's going to get a door. So we stay with the other conversation. And then very useful was that line, where were we? So we could just resume that conversation.
Give me a minute, would you?
Absolutely.
So, where were we?
I bought her cookbook when I moved to New York in...
Right. So that's how we get the guests in. We'll get on to food in a minute. How do we do it? I mean, it's a layered process. Layer one is the most important layer. That's really the edit. That is just that's where all the real work is. You edit for natural pace. You edit to make it sound like a conversation. You add glue. What's glue? I call it glue. Glue is those things that really just make it sound like a real conversation. Those are laugh sighs, yeses, nos, reallys, all of that. This is crucial. This is crucial because if you get a lot of interviews, there's just one person talking, and then you want to. This is the real secret to making it all sound like everyone's there at the same time. So, what we do is, as we're going through the archive, we mine it for these things, these very useful glue bits, and then it gets all labelled up, and then I have a bank. So if at any point I think that needs a yes from Barbara Windsor, I know where to find it. And we also get the host to record a whole load. So that's a sort of list of things I might get a host to record. And some of them are very good. Laughs are really hard to do cold and just say, can you give me a load of different laughs from small to big? And obviously some hosts are much more natural than others. Let me explode a session now a little bit. 5 minutes, all right. Very quick then. Okay, so this is the Sophie Ellis Bextor. It's a little bit of the session.
In my house, and my kids adore her too.
Let's have a look. So we've got Sophie at the top. Can you all see that? Oops.
Can you give me a hand with those lights? Can you just hold this bit for me? I'm just going to plug it in.
So that's the dry voice.
Ah, looks nice. Looks great, doesn't it? Bit of sparkle for tonight.
With Judith Kerr.
Get out of the way, Titus. Oh no, this is Titus, so he's my big bro.
And then if you go down, we've got things like glasses clinking, the Foley. What have we got?
Hold this bit for me. I'm just going to plug it in.
Oh yes, the sound of the Christmas lights being plugged in.
This bit for me. I'm just going to plug it in. Looks nice. Looks great, doesn't it? Yes. Bit of sparkle.
And we've also got background music, which actually really helps. It helps just to gel the scene, and it also you can use it to change the pace of the scenes. So when people get a bit slower towards the end of the evening, you can change the background music. And I do treat the music so it's not in your face, so it sounds like it's in the room. Diegetic, as we might say.
Tonight?
Brilliant.
This is Titus, so he's my big bruiser. He's an alpha. He's about 5 years old.
It loses
I know
its
that
pace
you
a
love
bit.
cats. And what's yours called?
Katinka. She has me absolutely under her thumb. When I'm having my breakfast, she comes and jumps up.
Let's just do a little bit. Does that all make sense then, the way the layers work? And that's when it really comes together. Once you start putting in all the little, let's see what we got.
Starter. So I've done a mix of stuff. So don't hold back.
There's a lot of eating sounds, a lot of knives and forks, and then when dessert comes, it's the sound of spoons. These things do matter, as I found. They matter a lot.
Back, get stuck in.
It looks fantastic.
I've got some bruschetta there, so that's like tomatoes, garlicky stuff.
Marvellous.
Some baba ganoush, have you all had? Yeah, so sort of smoky aubergine thingy.
Great.
This one here, there's some mixed meats here, some cheeses. Just help yourself. Oh, so good.
All good? All good? How much time? Like 1 minute or something? Right, okay. Well, what shall I say? I'm not going to talk about that. It's too technical. That's how I used to take the noise out. Rights, ethics and gimmicks. All the archive comes from the BBC, so we have been okay with rights. I think, well, we don't really worry about it, but we've got a very good, we've got someone very good at the at BBC Archives who helps us a lot. We try never to represent people's positions, so some people say we put words in their mouths. We only do that for a bit of comedy. So if it's a serious point, then we don't put words in their mouths. And I just want to say one more thing about the future. I wonder how much, in an age of deepfake and AI, where you can now pretty much just type in stuff and get it to sound like someone speaking, I wonder if the novelty of this will wear a bit. Because at the moment, it's like a very clever editing exercise. Maybe people are impressed by it, but will they be in the future? I don't know.
Thanks. Thanks, Pez. Oh, that went quick. After 4 o'clock. Pez is going to be part of the masterclass after 4 o'clock. So for the students, so make sure you miss that. I don't know about anyone else in here, but that's the one idea. Whenever I hear it, it's the one I go, I wished I had had that idea. So brilliant. Could have listened to that a lot more. Thank you very much. So it's a great pleasure to introduce our next guest, Sarah Parker. You are a guest of honour. Sarah is the daughter of Charles Parker. But she's also a multi-award-winning producer and a trustee of the Charles Parker Trust. So shortly, I think, Sarah, you're going to be talking to some of the past winners of the Charles Parker Prize. But first, you have another special guest who I will leave you to introduce. Yes, onto the floor, of course, yeah. But this, I don't know if this will affect the camera shot, but yes, of course.
Where we want to sit.
Oh, okay. You're right there. Okay. You okay, Sarah?
No, I was just a bit concerned.
Yeah, I understand.
Andrew, you need to turn to me a bit. Now, since I've messed everything up,
That's okay. So I'll leave Sarah to introduce her special guest. So please welcome Sarah Parker.
I'm all turned on, am I? Yes, I am. Well, this is Andrew. Andrew, what's your surname again?
My name's Andrew Cheel.
Cheel, yes. Now, I have a reason for forgetting your name, because I think Charles used to forget surnames and names in general, didn't he?
He did, yes.
So do you want me to tell me how you met Charles?
Yes, I'll tell you very briefly how I met Charles. I went to the Polytechnic of Central London, which is now the University of Westminster. I went there in 1973, and Charles was a regular guest lecturer on the course that I was doing, which was a Diploma in Communication Studies. It quickly became a BA Media Studies, but when I did it, it was a 3-year diploma. Charles was a regular guest lecturer, and basically he inspired me to want to work in radio. I started out on the course thinking I was going to go into written journalism, but by the time I finished, mostly thanks to Charles, written journalism had been written off, and I was in love with radio.
Okay, so, but you were a sports journalist, weren't you?
I spent most of my career as a sports journalist, doing Olympic Games, World Cups, Wimbledon tennis, etc. People paid me to watch football. It's a rubbish job, but somebody's got to do it.
Okay. So, when you, that particular time, when you went to one of Charles's talks, okay, what did you think of him?
My first impression was, here's someone with an immense intellect, with a brain the size of a planet, and I was going to struggle to keep up. That was my first thought. But then I thought, this is going to be one hell of an adventure. And so it proved, indeed. It was a real adventure. Listening to Charles, everything you did was challenged. Everything you did was asked a question. The questions that he asked were ones that you didn't think, you'd never thought of the question, let alone the answer.
So I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to ask you, did you listen to the fight game? Have you heard the fight
I
game?
have heard the fight game many times over. And there was one occasion when Charles was doing a seminar on the fight game, and I suddenly heard a sobbing noise from the other side of the stage. It was Charles in tears listening to his own work. And I thought, there's a man of great passion. And I admired that, and it's another reason why I admire him.
Yeah, because he probably had a heart as big as a planet as well, didn't he?
Yes, absolutely. A heart as big as a planet, no question. Everything he did was passionate. Everything he did was for a reason. But yes, heart and head were very impressive.
But in that moment, when you were listening to him talking about the fight game, I think you helped him out.
Yes. At the end, he was struggling to remember the names of the two boxers who took part in the big fight at the end of the radio ballad, The Fight Game. Charles was sitting there going, well, the one boxer is this is called so-and-so, and the other one was Johnny, what was his name? Birmingham boy. And I knew who he was talking about. So I just piped up, Johnny Prescott. And Charles went, brilliant, you're a genius. Which made me very popular with my student colleagues. You know, they were now working with a genius.
And you're Andrew?
Yes.
No, I felt I had to
yes,
teach
absolutely.
you a bit about that. So what did you go on to do?
I started out, when I left college, getting jobs in the media was very difficult. I went into being a press officer for the CBI, for God's sake, the Civil Aviation Authority. Yes, I wouldn't want to do that now. I also worked for the Civil Aviation Authority press office, where you persuade people that flying is a safe method of travel. It's only the takeoffs and landings you want to worry about. Also the Manpower Services Commission and various organisations like that. Then I saw an advert for a job that said sports editor, Radio Orwell in Ipswich. That is my job. That is my dream. That's what I want to do. I did 2 interviews. I got the job. And literally, when the letter arrived and I opened it, I danced around the living room for 10 minutes in celebration.
And so what was the impact of what Charles gave? You know, how Charles...
I think he taught me to be passionate about everything, to be a perfectionist. I remembered him talking about one section of Singing the Fishing where they did 60 takes to get one section right. And it was less than a minute, but 60 takes. And I did one audio montage at Radio Orwell, where I did about 25 takes before I got it right. So absolutely perfectionist in everything.
But it was difficult then. It was a completely different way of...
Totally different world in those days. There were only, I think, 20 BBC local radio stations. Commercial radio was only just coming on the air when I left college. So it was very difficult to get a job. You just took what you could.
But do you think that local radio stations gave a chance for people to talk, you know, not just the sort of received voices from London or the Home Service?
In those days, certainly the BBC stations did. The commercial radio stations less so because they were into playing records, but some of them definitely did. You really, yes, absolutely. The local voices in local areas, there was a BBC station in Leicester, Birmingham, all over the place. So there were about 20, and yes, they did give people the space to use their voices.
Yeah. So what was the best interview you did, do you think?
The best interview I did was probably Stephen Redgrave after he won his 5th gold medal in Sydney. I asked him one question, and I said, what were you feeling an hour before the race started? An hour before your 5th gold medal race started, what did you do? What were you feeling? And he said, I went down the corridor, I sat on a chair, and I cried for 10 minutes. And it got rid of all the pent-up emotion so that I could now row the boat properly.
Yeah. So I expect you're better at timing than I am, so I'm going to have to... Have we got a clip to play of Charles? Sorry, should we do that then? Yes. Okay. You can see how well planned we are.
It is my lady, oh, it is my love. Oh, that she knew she were. She speaks, yet she says nothing. What of that? Her eye discourses. I will answer it, I am too bold. 'Tis not to me she speaks. And it gives this spurious life to the activity, and gives a feeling of security in an audience who are accustomed to hearing woman's hour, you know, package, package, package. What it also does, of course, is in fact quite spuriously imply that we dealt with that. 2 minutes on European Common Market, that's it. You know, which is a load of baloney on anything.
There hasn't really been enough work done in recording traditional storytellers, in understanding the creative implications of storytelling at its highest point.
Look, my love, every member of the working class you go to, whether he's a miner in Kent or whether he's a fisherman on the north coast of Scotland or where the hell he is, this is an absolutely concrete fact of their life, that no matter how much they earn, however much they get in a wage demand, they always seem to be as badly off.
In the blusterous wind and the great dark water, our ship went drifting on the sea, her headgear gone, and her rudder broken, which brought us to extremity.
Charles, from Romeo and Juliet, you may have recognised, to right at the end singing a sailing song from, I think, somewhere in the northeast of England. And everything in between was his passionate talking about politics as well.
What is it like to hear his voice again for you?
Good question. When I went to the Charles Parker Archive in Birmingham a few weeks ago to do some research for today, and when I first heard his voice, it set the hairs on the back of my neck up, and I thought, phew, those were exciting days. That was a really good time.
Now, you told me that you listened to the Fight Game back to back many times. Mm-hmm. The Fight Game isn't so well known, one of the radio ballads, is it? Could you just tell me a bit about why it's special?
It's special to me because it's about sport. It's special to me because it uses music which is not just folk music. It uses brass instruments, it uses trumpets and trombones, and
he used jazz, didn't he?
It uses jazz as well. And in one section, he uses what he describes as music hall songs, which is actually, what's the name of the guy who plays the banjo, the ukulele? George Formby. He uses music that Charles referred to as a bit George Formby, which was part of McCall's genius to just pick a tune, but not just a tune. If you think of the song Shoals of Herring, Charles explained to us how Ewan McCall had written it in a way that reflected the ebb and flow, the movement of the ocean waves. So it's, with our nets and gear we're faring on the wild and wasteful, oh, yeah, you see? It goes up and down like the ocean waves.
Okay, so what about the sort of characters within, or the narratives within the Fight Game, would you say?
I recognised a lot of the people in the Fight Game because I'd heard them on the radio, seen them on the television, the boxing promoters, the boxing managers, the boxers themselves. So it's even got Henry Cooper in there, a few clips.
But do you think that he got under the surface of what fighting was about, of boxing was about?
Mostly he did. There was one area where there was one line that didn't gel with me, and that's the very last line. What's left is the thrill when you count the receipts, and I thought that didn't work for me because boxing was more about the actual pugilistic confrontation than it was about money. That was my understanding of it anyway.
Except it was a way that these men...
Yeah, it was the only way out of the ghetto for many of them.
Yeah, exactly. So did you know any of these did you identify with any of these boxers?
Yes, absolutely. I'd heard the voice of Henry Cooper turns up on the programme, and I recognised him immediately. The voice of Johnny Prescott, the main character in the Fight Game, I recognised his voice straight away. And there were one or two other boxing promoters as well that I thought, I know him, and I know him.
But do you think it was possible to, in the radio ballads, to explore more the sort of motivation and things rather than what maybe you would do in sports, sports journalism?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Much easier to explore the motivation in a radio ballad than it would be in my job, which was just to report the facts.
And so what do you think that the fighting... Sorry. Oh, are you? Okay, sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, I always record too much, I think Simon would say. Would you agree, wouldn't you, Simon? Okay, it's been so lovely to talk to you. Thank you so much.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go. You're all right to
So, Talia, I think you're coming down. Talia was last year's gold winner. With her absolutely fantastic piece, The Sound Collector. Am I asking for everybody down all in one go? Okay. Sorry, I seem a bit... yes, now Chantel Herbert. Now, Chantel, her piece went out on New Storytellers 2021. And it was called Sister Shack.
No, it was called Outsider Sisters.
Sorry?
Outsider Sisters.
Outsider Sisters, yes, okay. And you're Lewis. Now, Harrow. I can't read his writing, Harrow. I have to be absolutely honest, I'm really bad with names. As you can tell. Yeah, but I must first of all just tell you a story about my dad, was that he actually forgot the name of my mum when they just got married, apparently. She was very annoyed. So he was walking down the street and he was with somebody, and there was my mum, whose name was Phyllis, and he couldn't remember her name when he had to introduce her. So I think it's obviously in the DNA, isn't it? Just like my love for audio. Right. Gosh. How am I going to get to... Okay, Talia, tell me. Oh, yes, of course. All right. I'm not used to being a presenter. I'm normally behind the microphone. I kept on all the time with Michael, trying to move my microphone here. I don't want you to have the control, you see, Talia. But tell me about the Sound Collector.
So I made the Sound Collector during a course at UCL, and it was about a poem that I thought my sister wrote, and I had invented the story that I wanted to tell in my head. And then when I did the interview with her, she basically said, I didn't write this, and the whole story collapsed. And then I made something out of the pieces, basically.
It didn't collapse, though, did it?
No,
Who
something
did
new.
Write the poem?
Someone called Roger McGough, who I actually didn't know at the time. And I sent him an email saying, hello, Robert McCough, which is very embarrassing. And he very kindly replied. And I basically got him to read my sister's childlike version of the poem and made it as a part of the piece.
Why was it important to you, this particular piece?
Well...
I think you need to explain a little bit more.
Yeah, so my mum died when I was little, and I thought that the poem was my sister writing about that, so I had just projected an entire story onto this poem, and it became very important to me. And so when it fell apart, I think it represented like a loss of that control and that projection. And so making the piece, and making this alternate reality where Taya did write it, my sister, and I forgot his name, Roger McGough, read it. Yeah, I know. I think that was quite cathartic, and it was like, it really consolidated a lot of emotions into one narrative arc, and it was really helpful, the process of making it. And yeah.
So Chantal, this is Chantal Herbert. Could you just tell me, are you on?
I am now,
Yes,
yeah.
you are on now. Could you tell me why your piece was so important? Because it was for you, it was your voice, wasn't it?
No.
No, I don't mean it was your voice, but
yeah,
it was a story that you felt was really important to tell.
So...
Not your personal voice,
yeah,
I'm
no,
saying.
I'm just messing with you. So I came onto the Sunderland course as a mature student, and I'm usually the only black person in any room in the Northeast generally when it comes to the... Hello. Yeah, someone waving at me about that. Yeah, not today. But yeah, in terms of like audio production or in the arts in the Northeast, there's not many of us. And I wanted to explore what it felt like to be a black woman or non-binary person who migrated or grew up in the UK. And I decided to interview, I think it was 11 or 14 people and their experiences. But I don't really like making linear narrative audio. I'm a DJ, that's what I do like mainly for a living. So a lot of my work is around sort of like non-linear narrative when I edit. And I just wanted to explore that feeling and that emotion. And obviously what comes up with that is often about racism. So I just wanted to explore what it felt like that, but in sort of a non-linear way without my voice being in it. So yeah, that's why I made it, because to me that's just important, and to have amplified black people's voices.
I think I said when it was your voice, you made it from this...
It's more of a lens than a voice. I think it's like an audio, the lens that you have.
Yes, sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. No, I'm not correcting you or anything. It's just,
no, please do.
Okay. Amplifying the voices of women, and not just black women, but women, non-binary people in particular, is really important to me. I used to work for the Andrews Centre, which is a charity that helps domestic violence and violence against women and girls survivors. So to me, it's always important for me to amplify women's voices and non-binary people's voices. But with who I am as a person and my experiences, this is what I know best, being black and being minoritized. And in other ways as well, I'm not just minoritized in terms of my skin tone. I'm a queer woman, lesbian. I class myself as a fat person. I grew up as fat most of my life, all my life. And even when you become thinner, you still have that in your mind. So, you're marginalized in many other ways. And I think that telling those stories in a way, in that kind of non-linear way as well, is really important, because it's about not just putting a voice, as in, not just putting a voice in, oh God, what's going on here? Not just putting a voice in terms of the spoken voice, but also bringing across a feeling. So for me, that whenever I edit, that is what I think about. I think about it in music, sound effects terms.
Yeah, yes.
Which I think came across in the piece.
It comes across, this feeling of the music with the people. The voice anyway has this musical sort of quality.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
And even when I edit, when I'm editing, I hear things in sound.
Is it? Yes.
Oh, this one? Yeah.
Yes.
I hear when I edit, I hear things and see things almost in numbers and sequences. Like I've noticed that by myself. I'm quite neurodiverse. I have many neurodiversities. So to me, music is almost numbered, and I feel like that kind of slow, fast sound effects, pace editing, it's just what I enjoy the most. And I think when you're editing, however you edit is the way that you do it. But for me, it's about pacing, it's about timing, and for me, that's very important.
And winning, being in New Storytellers, what difference has it made for you?
It just gave me a bit of confidence, because I came on this course or the Sunderland course as a mature student. I'm 40 now, and when I started I was 36, and I did it as a part-time student, so I did 2 cohorts, I was nominated twice, by the way, just so we know. So for me, that was important because I'd done audio a long time ago when I was a teenager, before podcasting was even like a thing, before you even had the internet, but it wasn't like it is now. So to me, having that recognition that I actually was doing something that I enjoyed and other people found it enjoyable. It's not about the kudos of like winning. For me, it's just about the feeling validated. And as a black person, for me, I'm always feeling like I want validation, which is a horrible thing for me to even say. But I constantly move through this world wanting and seeking validation. So yeah, that's what. Sorry, get emotional. That made me feel really good and validated.
And while we're still on previous winners, what has it actually done for you, winning the gold prize?
Similarly, yeah, it gave me a confidence, and also I didn't really have a place for the piece, and I think that it was really nice to find it at home, and BBC is a quite nice home. And then also just, I guess, yeah, it helped my career in many ways that I know, and I'm sure many ways that I don't even realise, and self-confidence. And even the week after last year, I had an interview for a job, and I very sheepishly mentioned it in the interview, and I got the job. It was my first full-time role in audio, so I'm sure it was helpful for that. So lots of those kind of things.
I'm sorry, I must move on. So tell me about your piece.
Yeah, so my piece is called Living...
This is past the microphone.
My piece was called Living with Dementia, and it's not really from a personal angle. I don't know anyone with dementia in my life. I personally was just concerned about my memory, because I feel like I've got a rubbish memory, and I was worried about it getting worse in the future. So dementia was always something that I worried about. So I wanted to find out a bit more about it, and realised that in doing so, there's a lot of different support out there for people living with dementia that I didn't know about before. So there's things like slow shopping, where shops will have certain hours where they don't have music on, they'll have more chairs out, and their staff are more supportive with people, things like that. And in the piece, I also wanted to do it in a way that was creative and a little bit challenging for myself. So I wanted it to sound like someone with dementia, like their experience, basically. So at times it was overwhelming with sound effects and background noise, and yeah, that's what I did.
You were trying to get inside somebody's head.
Yeah, which is difficult when obviously you don't know how to experience it. You have to go from what you hear about it and what the facts are, and yeah, a bit of creative license as well.
And has that changed the way you think of people with dementia now?
I think it has, yeah. I think to sort of quote one of the contributors from Living with Dementia, the best way to interact with someone living with dementia is to get into their world, because they're not in your world anymore. So
do you think that's what audio gives us, a chance to get into other people's worlds and understand other people's
definitely.
worlds?
That is one of the strengths in audio production,
yes.
The ability to hear anybody's world in any soundscape, in any place, right in your ear, in your own head.
I think that's probably a really good way to finish. Oh, yes, sorry. I'd forgotten. No, I hadn't forgotten, actually. I just wanted to finish on the good final. Tell me what you're doing now.
So currently I am in the process of creating a documentary for Radio 4 called Pilgrimage for a Pint, which should be out by the end of the year, with Andy Cartwright. I've also just started my own audio production business, doing personalised audio documentaries up in Scotland.
Personalised, that sounds so. Helping people with memories?
Yeah,
yeah,
sort of like that. It's recording people's life stories so that their family and friends can listen to it for generations to come.
Oh, well, good luck. That all sounds wonderful. I'm sorry, Andy. Yeah. I was worried about the time there. Have you?
I've set up an audio production business, and last year I won the BBC's Indie Fund, inaugural Indie Fund, which has been great. So I've been having mentoring for the last year. I also, I've got an exhibition coming at Seton Delville Hall, which is in Northumberland, and it's a mixture of photography, what my friend's done, and an audio piece, sort of the experiences of these people that are photographed, just around who they are and their experiences. So lots of arty stuff, and the audio production, just trying to set up an audio production business and trying to work out where I actually fit in the audio landscape, really.
So, well, I've sort of asked Harriet, but I will ask her again.
I just started a new job at a company called Broccoli, so I'm making podcasts with them, 2 weeks ago. I also run In the Dark London and sort of organise those
you're running
events.
In the Dark?
Yeah.
That started again?
Yes, it has. Exactly. You have to come down.
I will, definitely, actually, because I used to really like it.
Yeah.
Sorry, we're going to have a coffee, shall we?
That's fine.
Look, thank you so much for all of you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Talia, Chantal and Lewis. And thanks to Sarah Parker as well. Thank you. It's all right. Calm down. You're right. Great. And wonderful to hear from you as well, Andrew. And we look forward to hearing some more from you in the 4:00 session about influence of Charles Parker. Okay, so now it's the moment that we've all been waiting for. It's time for the announcement of the winners of the Charles Parker Prize 2023. So which 5 features will be securing those broadcast slots on Radio 4 this summer, and who will the gold winner be? So to reveal all and say a few words, please welcome the man who had those incredibly difficult decisions to make, Commissioner from BBC Radio 4, Hugh Levinson, and also Simon Elms, Chair of the Judging Panel.
Thanks very much, Kelly. Have you got the envelope? Sorry, that's a joke. That's good. I'd like to thank Simon and all the other judges for selecting these 11 programmes to listen to. People often say, oh, it was really difficult to choose, and that's normally BS. But in this case, it really was genuinely difficult. I thought they were all really good. I feel very assured about the future of features journalism with the quality of what I heard. I think it's got a very bright future. I'm really pleased that we'll be able to play 5 of these on Radio 4. They're really, really excellent. So thank you very much. And for those people who weren't selected, it was a really, really good programme. It was a very difficult decision, I have to say. So, in no particular order, I'll say one programme which was just a joy. Just very simple. You couldn't help smiling. Brilliant story, really beautifully done with a light touch, which is Don Brown's The Final Fanfare. So, thank you very much. Just splendid. The second one was one that just spoke to me. It was so simple, it's so powerful. As I've been walking around cities, it's been echoing in my head. And actually seeing evidence of what I heard. It's one that's changed my view of the world, which is quite a thing to do in 14 minutes, was, I think, the brilliant and important Harassment Architecture by George Ruskin. Thank you. Again, another superb piece that, again, has taught me a lot. I think it's always a very good idea if you're making a radio feature to make it about sound. And I thought this was a superb and, again, important story, which was Lottie Steele's Out at Sea, Out of Mind. Well done, Lottie. you have a fan base, so you'll boost our listener figures. I hope that's all good. And then a very unusual piece, which I thought was audacious, is the word I'd use, and pulling a trick on the listener, which is something I think I wouldn't normally go for, but I thought this was very bold and a brilliant thing to do, which is Christina Hardinger's Life Partners. It was and then finally, I will hand over to Simon to talk about the gold winner.
This year's Charles Parker Award for Best Audio Feature and the Gold Award was the unanimous choice of all 6 of our judges this year. No disputes, no wrangling, no casting votes. The judges commented it's brutal, with a story to tell and a way of unfolding it that keeps you listening. Shocking, open, honest, chilling and tender by turns, with excellent use of sound and music. I loved the self-doubt, the pain, the empathy, the tainting nature of the dilemma that all were involved with. And the 2023 Charles Parker Gold Award for Student Feature goes to Thea Rickard of Goldsmiths, University of London, for her outstanding feature, Our Dad. And let's hear a clip.
Our dad was an alcoholic, and he was angry about a lot of things. Mainly, though, I think he was angry at himself. His dream was to be an actor. He might have even been good, but he could never stick with anything long enough to make a proper go at it.
I always thought with his acting, if he could have just found enough of a foothold with acting, it would have allowed him, you know, quite a good place in the world.
I think the reason that our dad drank was to forget that he didn't have this foothold in the acting world. But if you were drinking to forget reality, you get angry and violent after too many pints of Stella. That was his drink, and I have never touched it. This never mixes well with having a wife and young kids. At the worst, this meant Dad hurting his wife. At the best, this meant, well, I'll let my sister tell you.
Because it says in the obituary, you know, Jo Rickard, mother of 2, has sadly passed away from cancer, and said her husband, Jonathan Rickard, and then in brackets it says actor, casualty.
What's worse is that he was only really in one scene of Casualty. He played a man who was part of a group who dressed up as Vikings on the weekend.
Hey, Len?
Yeah?
I was just wondering if you could help me with a little query.
Oh, well, what's that?
Well, you see, I know you're a little bit of an expert on Viking history.
Well, not an expert, but yet I suppose I do know a thing or two. Far away.
If I've got grass stains on my tunic, do I soak or scrub?
Not exactly Oscar-worthy, right? And they cast him as somebody clearly trying to make someone else feel small. I find that interesting. Was it that obvious?
I mean, really, the sad thing about it as well is that he was a failed actor, wasn't he? Really.
Did you ever see him perform?
Yes, I did. In Scotland, when him and Jo temporarily moved to Scotland and started the Children's Theatre in Edinburgh.
Yeah, you heard that right. A children's theatre company. The same man that did this.
Do you remember Kieran Redmond? Policeman in Bristol, ex-policeman, one of Dad's friends. No, I remember Simon saying that Dad had had the conversation with Kieran Redmond about what to do if he'd ever killed someone. Yeah, that was pretty dark.
Our dad was an alcoholic, and he was angry.
Is there more? Well, Thea can't be with us, unfortunately, but I just think for all 11 nominees and all 5 of the winners, and also especially to Thea, let's have one big final round of applause. Incredible stuff. So we're coming to the end of Charles Parker Day for 2023. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks to everyone who's been watching online via the live stream. What's going to happen next is a half-an-hour tea break. And then, as we've mentioned, at 4 o'clock, there'll be 2 sessions happening simultaneously. Downstairs in room 007 is the session on sound design for the students. And in this room, we're going to be talking more about Charles Parker influence. So thanks very much to all our guests and speakers. Thank you to Grant and Stephen and the technical team here. Thanks to the university for hosting the event today. And just before we finish, I'd just like to invite Caroline Mitchell, who's a professor of radio and participation here at the uni, just to say a few words. Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you. It really is just a few words. Andy Cartwright. I just want to have a little word about Andy. I first met Andy at a conference here back in the late 1990s. It was called the Hearing is Believing Conference. And a few years later, I was on his interview panel when he was appointed as lecturer in radio production. And this year, at the end of the academic year, Andy is actually retiring from the university, which is a bit sad for us, but I just wanted to acknowledge it and say thank you to Andy. Andy, as a colleague, is kind, knowledgeable, sometimes very busy, incredibly supportive of staff and students. And it will be a loss that you're retiring. I know you've got some great things to do. And I do want to say you're not retiring from the Charles Parker work, and you're not retiring from the soundscape work. And we're really grateful that you will be coming back to do some spots, and also that really important link between the Charles Parker Trust, Soundscape Productions, radio and the university. You've really contributed a huge amount, and I just wanted to publicly acknowledge that and say thank you very much.
Want to say anything? Andy has declined to comment. Thanks, Caroline. What a lovely way to end Charles Parker Day for this year. And we'll be back next year for the 21st Charles Parker Day. Thanks very much. See you next year.